Hi, listeners, and welcome to the IAOM Global Podcast Series, the podcast of International Management Division of the Academy of Management. I am Luis Ricardo, and together with the members of the Membership Drive Committee, we are going to talk to scholars from the IAOM division to know more about them, their research and motivations. And I should add, this podcast is one among many initiatives of the IAOM division to foster research and practice of management with cross-border and cross-cultural dimension. Visit us at iam.aom.org to get started. Now on to the show.
Welcome to this new episode of IAM Global. I'm your host, Patricio Duran, Assistant Professor in International Business at San Luis University. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing Dr. Len Treviño. Len is SBA Communication Distinguished Professor in International Business and IB Program Director at Florida Atlantic University. He's also the President of the Iberoamerican Academy of Management. Dr. Trevino got an MBA and PhD in International Business from Indiana University. He's an active researcher in multinational enterprises, FDI, institutions, gender and diversity, and cross-cultural management. Len has multiple publications in journals like Journal of International Business Studies, Journal of Management, Journal of World Business, Academy of Management Learning and Education, among others. Len, thank you so much for being our guest today.
Thank you so much, Patricia. I really appreciate it. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Len, can you tell us a bit more about yourself, such as hobbies, passions that you have?
Yeah, sure. When I'm not researching, I love to travel. I love to do yoga. I visited about 85 countries and counting. I want to get to 100 if I can after COVID counts down here. I enjoy running, skiing, anything to do with health and fitness. And I also love music. What kind of music do I love? Almost anything, really. I like jazz, I like opera, hard rock, and especially alternative rock, like people like The Cure, The Smiths, Echo and the Bunnymen. I love all kinds of music.
We have similar taste in music, Len. What have you learned personally and professionally over this pandemic period?
Well, it's interesting. I was scheduled to go to Italy just the week before the pandemic. We had a consortium for undergraduate international business education conference there. It was going to be in Rome. And I decided the day before the flight or 2 days before not to go. And then the next day they canceled it. So I was prescient about that. But yeah, I've learned to value friends, family, those people on whom you can count during tough times. And especially for those of us who love to travel, it's been a difficult time, but certainly not as difficult as those who lost family and friends. And, another thing, I've always known this, but I also came to really value research that can help disenfranchised groups and society at large. Research that makes a difference, something that's impactful outside of the academy.
Unfortunately, pandemic has not over yet. What cross-cultural research can inform us about the variance in infection rates across nations?
Patricio, it's funny that you asked that. I imagine that you noticed a pre-publication of a study on which we've been working, and I am delighted to report that it was recently accepted at Journal of International Business Studies after about a year. So the title of that paper is Cross-Cultural Exploratory Analysis of Pandemic Growth, the Case of COVID-19. So I work with a team of scholars, and I just want to shout out my amazing co-authors, Ratan Deer and Carolyn Egri, and also the associate editor, Dana Minbayeva, and two anonymous reviewers. They were very helpful in helping us to make this paper a better paper that we think it can help save lives if governments use our findings. So what did we find? Well, in general, we found that a nation's culture played a vital role in its ability to curtail the spread of COVID-19, or the opposite, to facilitate its spread, providing a roadmap for future pandemics that we believe, again, will save lives and minimize the economic fallout. There's some specific findings. I can go through some of those. We used Hofstede's cultural value dimensions, and we found that collectivistic nations such as South Korea and Singapore, whose citizens display altruistic behavior and prioritize group goals, they experienced lower COVID-19 growth rates than individualistic nations, such as the US, UK, and Italy, where people emphasize individual freedoms and personal interests. Now, while this result may appear obvious to cross-cultural researchers, what I learned is that this politician saying no lockdown or we need to lock down, it's just missing the point. It's not black and white, as some politicians would have us believe. One doesn't need to lock down completely to control the spread of a pandemic. Masks and social distancing go a long way. So we captured case data every day for the first 90-day period, and we captured Oxford University has a stringency index. It should be from 0 to 100. And we believe that, let me just tell you what happened with the collectivistic and individualistics. The US and other individualistic countries should learn from past experience. Why did South Korea do so well? Well, they did well in part because they applied what they learned from the previous SARS epidemic. And we argue that all countries should attempt to unify their citizens by pointing out that adhering to pandemic control measures and a healthy economy go hand in hand. It's not one or the other. It's, again, some politicians would have you believe. Interestingly, although collectivistic nations initially had higher case levels of COVID-19 than individualistic nations, we found that government stringency, even at low levels in collectivistic nations, served to curb case growth. In contrast, much more restrictive government measures are needed to mitigate pandemic spread in individualistic nations. So stringent government measures during the initial phase of the pandemic were critical to slowing the increase in cases.
This is very interesting, Len. Among your publications, one has particular implications for our audience, especially PhD and junior scholars. With a group of co-authors, you explored the antecedents of non-monetary rewards in designing the first authors. Could you explain what this paper is about and what are the main findings?
Yeah, one of the things about this paper, we wanted to understand what explained who gets to be the first author on a paper, because according to Academy of Management principles and guidelines, it's a meritocracy. The person who put in the most work should be the first author. And this is how I always evaluated this paper. And my co-authors and I, David Balkin was the first author, Luis Gomez Mejia, and a couple of other folks, did an amazing job with this paper. But we did an interview, and on average, scholars tended to agree that merit is a crucial factor to assign authorship and power as the less relevant factor. However, empirically, we observed that the effect of power, so it's sort of two studies, one interview and then one empirical. The effect of power on being the first author is very strong. How did we measure power? Well, those persons who were in a hierarchy, or they had an associate dean position, or they were a full professor with an endowed chair title, etc. It has a significant role. The finding that power is significant in the first author study, despite the survey of the authors who indicate that merit is more important, has a subtle interpretation. An author with power based on hierarchy, expertise, or social network may be deemed first author by co-authors simply by being perceived as being powerful without having to use this power. So the powerful co-author may get the first author without asserting his or her power. As an analogy, we can think of wolves or lions who collaborate on a kill to kill an antelope. The alpha wolf, the most powerful one, gets to eat first, and the other wolves get the leftovers.
Do you think being the first author should matter for tenure?
In my opinion, it should. It should, because first author indicates that you have the ability to lead a research project. Now, in reality, does it? I think that depends on the school. Like I said, I've reviewed so many CVs in doing research on gender and other things. So I became really interested in that. And my belief is that a school in the top, I'm going to guess here, let's say 120, 130 and better, so 1 to 130, it matters. It matters. There's some places for sure you're not getting tenure unless you've demonstrated the ability to lead research projects.
Len, what will be the implications of this study for junior faculty?
Well, I'll address that question directly, and then I'll tell you what I think is a better question. A junior faculty should stand up for themselves and demand that authors follow principles of meritocracy. In a tenured and non-tenured world, this is easier said than done, but this is standard protocol for AOM publications. So that's the first answer. But in general, I think it's better to ask, what are the implications for senior faculty? Because senior faculty are the likely people who may be taking advantage of the power to secure a better position on the paper. So I'll just harken back to my days as a doctoral student under John Daniels at Indiana University. And when I finished my dissertation, John said, you can do the papers by yourself, you can have me on the papers, and I demand that I would be second author in the event that there are two of us because it's your work, kind of thing. So that's the way that I take it. But I would say we have to ask, what are the implications for junior scholars and for senior scholars?
Do you think that naming the authors alphabetically will reduce any potential conflict among them?
I don't know, Patricio. That's a good question, because in economics and finance, they do go in alphabetical order. It really looks very strange. My finance colleagues tell me if they were to go out of alphabetical order. But the norm in management and marketing is to operate on a meritocracy, whoever put the most work into the project. Personally, I've rarely had a problem with this. Everybody sort of understands who's the first author. So I don't argue for going alphabetical in management. I think we just need to really operate on a meritocracy and just look at it that way. I think it's very important that we abide by the guidelines that Academy of Management has very clearly laid out.
You also explored the topic of meritocracy in the allocation of named professorships in academia. On a sample of more than 500 management professors, you found that women are less likely to be awarded named professorships or endowed chairs, controlling for research performance. Can you explain to us why?
Yes, that's a great question. That's exactly what we tried to do when we wrote this paper. And I'll again shout out my co-authors because it was a great team effort. David Balkin, Luis Gomez Mejia, and Frank Mixon. We just did an amazing job with this paper. And I think the main thing that we added to what we would call sort of a glass ceiling paper is that we controlled very strictly for performance. And it's this is the main thing that previous glass ceiling papers had not done, was control for performance. And in academia, this was management professors at top 100 universities. It's easy to gather performance information on faculty. You just go to Google Scholar, type in a name, and there you have the performance. So why do women face a lower probability? the field that there's conscious gender bias has kind of moved beyond that. It's more of a structure, what we term masculine gendered environment. So university settings, much like technology industries or law firms, were created by men, for men, and there's lots of reasons, but let me just tell you the reality of it is as follows. This is really interesting. Our empirical results indicate that the average male who has a CITES comp score of 0.11, 0.11, it doesn't matter, just assume that number. This person faces a probability of having been awarded a named professorship equal to 48%. While the average female who has a CITES comp score of 0.09, what we're saying is that, yes, on average, women have a slightly lower publication record than males, on average. But it's pretty close. She faces a probability of having been awarded a named professorship equal to 0.36, 36%, all else the same. So assuming the male's CITES comp score remains 0.11, the female scholar would have to increase her CITES comp score to 0.44, a score that is almost 5 times greater than her current score and 4 times greater than his current score, to reach the same probability of holding an endowed chair. So yes, it's not a meritocracy, even though we teach about meritocratic principles in the academy.
According to the results of this study, what advice would you offer to female scholars to break this glass ceiling in academia?
I learned enough in doing gender research that I'm not going to offer the females any advice, because they're doing amazing. They're doing what they need to do. The better question is, what should administrators and universities and College of Businesses do? And we would suggest, we made some suggestions in our paper, but the main thing is, first is to establish a meritocracy and make sure it is a functioning meritocracy. Let's just start there. And so I have nothing to offer to advise female scholars. They're doing an amazing job and they should be rewarded as such.
Let's talk about your role as the president of the Iberoamerican Academy of Management. Can you explain to us its mission?
Sure. This is a great organization. I've been involved with this group for a long time, and I was named president a couple of years ago, and I feel highly honored to be in this position where I'm trying to make a difference with this very important organization that's a part of the Academy of Management. So our mission is to foster the general advancement of knowledge in the theory and practice of management among Ibero-American scholars and others interested in Ibero-American issues. So we have a lot of Latinx, I guess is the term now, people who are involved in Ibero, scholars from Spain, Portugal, Latin America, Central America, etc. We define Ibero-America broadly to include all of Latin America, Latino populations in North America, as well as Spain and Portugal. So moving beyond the mission, our vision is to perform and support educational activities that contribute to intellectual and operational leadership in the field of management within an Ibero-American context. Now, this is all great on paper, but we have some amazing people who are involved with this group. The current president of the Academy of Management, Herman Aguinas, he's the past president of IAOM, Luis Gomez Mejia, Julio de Castro, Carolina Gomez at Florida International University, and a number of other just amazing scholars. So what happens is, what can we offer to people who are interested in joining us? I've developed great collaborative research, working with people like Luis and like Herman Aguinas and others. And this is the first thing.
In which ways can scholars contribute to this association?
We are actively recruiting members, and ways that they can contribute would be on membership committees, doing PDWs at the Academy of Management, working on papers being advised by more senior scholars, developing partnerships with others. Like I said, I've worked with many co-authors from the Iberoamerican Academy, so finding collaborative research partners, presenting papers at our biannual conference. Our conference in 2021 was canceled, but we expect to be in the Dominican Republic in 2022. So please send your papers there when you get the notice for that. Other things would be teaching issues. How are they different in Ibero-American countries versus in the US and Canada and other places? So there's so many ways to contribute, and we're delighted to welcome new members to our group.
Len, you have plenty of experience in IB education. What do you think will be the future of IB teaching after the pandemic?
One of the things we have to figure out is how to get students doing what I would call boots on the ground international experiences. Because anytime I ask an executive who's interested in hiring a student with an international business major, which, by the way, we know that international business majors over the long run make more money than those without an international business education. I have some colleagues that did this research. But when I ask an executive, what is the single most important thing a student can do to be ready to operate in an international business setting, they say, do a study abroad or an internship or something to get in the country, because we can teach everything we want. We can do lots of experiential parts of the class, such as X culture, the cross-cultural experiential simulation. It's not a simulation, it's a consulting project. We can do all these things, but we need to get students into other countries, and the virtual study abroad is not going to do it. So we have to figure out a way to do that.
Yeah, that would be a great challenge for the next years. So anything you want to add to this interview, Len?
No, I appreciate it. I appreciate your inviting me, Patricio. I enjoyed spending time with you, and I hope that that some people may find some of the information useful. And if you're interested in Iberoamerican Academy of Management, please reach out to me. If you're interested in some of the research that I do, reach out. I learned that when I was a doctoral student, I had a mentor who didn't have to help me, but he did. And so I love to mentor junior faculty. I love to help others with their research, and this is what it has to be, because someone spent time with you and someone spent time with me, and we have to give back.
Thank you very much, Len. Very sure that our audience is going to take advantage of that opportunity. So Len, thank you so much again for your time and willingness to be part of IAM Global. It has been a pleasure to talk with you.
Thanks so much, Patricio. I really appreciate your inviting me, and look forward to speaking with you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of IAM Global. If you like this episode, please like the track and share it in social media. Stay safe.